My wife became pregnant while my best friend was staying with us. The twist is, I had a vasectomy in secret years ago. I decided to play along until I had undeniable proof of their affair. Recently, I discovered that my wife, Devon, was having an affair with my best friend, Jeff. I found out because she's pregnant, which is impossible since I had a vasectomy years ago. You might be wondering, OP, if she's pregnant, how do you know it's not yours? Well, there's less than a 1% chance that I could have gotten her pregnant post-vasectomy, and we've since confirmed with tests that the baby isn't mine. Let me give you some background. Jeff, my best friend since grade school, recently divorced earlier this year. He's like a brother to me, would have been best men at each other's weddings, went to the same college, took the same courses, and even joined the police force together, working at the same station. You get the picture. I got married young, at 20, to Trish, my high school sweetheart. She was the smart, funny, and beloved pastor's daughter, while I was the local hockey star with a promising future. We had our daughter at 21 and our son at 24, with a miscarriage in between. After my son was born, Trish and I decided we were done having kids, so I got a vasectomy. I didn't feel the need to announce it to anyone, just had a routine surgery over lunch and went back to work, and no one was the wiser. My ex-wife and I amicably drifted apart. We still loved each other, but the nature of our love changed over time. She started a successful home organization business once the kids became more independent, and she was passionate about growing her brand. Meanwhile, I was deeply involved in my work, frequently being deployed across Canada for teaching assignments. We grew apart, but we continued to support each other's pursuits. We're still great friends, often seeing each other and even sharing holidays together. Devon and Trish were on good terms and even hung out without me. They had a strong bond. Now, about Jeff and his wife, Amy. We spent a lot of time together, celebrating Friendsmas and Friendsgiving, camping, and more. When Jeff announced his divorce from Amy, it hit our group hard. We rallied to support him in any way we could. Amy was particularly tough on Jeff, threatening to move the kids to Ontario to be with her parents. Jeff was devastated and fought to keep his kids here, but ultimately, Amy moved them to Ontario. Watching him struggle and seeing his kids taken away was incredibly painful for all of us. During this time, Jeff leaned heavily on us, and since he had to sell his house, we let him stay with us until he got back on his feet. Initially, we expected it to be a short stay, but it ended up being longer than we'd anticipated. Devon suggested we renovate the garage into a suite for him. I agreed, and Jeff was really appreciative, pitching in to make it his own space. It was a bit of a hassle, but I wanted to help. Having Jeff in his own space was better for Devon and me. We could have some privacy without worrying about him overhearing things. Now about Devon. We met when she was working as a dispatch agent, a job she found incredibly stressful and stuck with for 2 years before switching to hairstyling, which she loves. Devon and I met a few months after my divorce from Trish was finalized. We hit it off well. She's 8 years older than me. She had no interest in having kids, and she was fun, really fun and adventurous. We shared a love for motorcycles and hunting trips. She was like one of the guys, but also had that wild, down and dirty spirit. I know it sounds bad, but she was exactly what I needed at the time. We had a lot in common, and because she didn't want kids, I never felt the need to tell her about my vasectomy. The topic just never came up, and I admit that was my mistake. She was the best stepmom to my kids and always said that was enough for her. She wasn't really the marrying type, but when I decided I wanted to spend my life with her, it just felt right. She wasn't against marriage, but she never expected it. I love how laid back she was about it. We had a small, intimate backyard wedding with a barbecue and a fire. It was perfect for us. Shortly after our wedding, Jeff's divorce was finalized, and he was still staying with us. We worked together but weren't on the same shifts, and with Devon's flexible schedule, she and Jeff often spent a lot of time alone together. At first, I thought Devon was just being a good friend and helpful, but things started to feel off. I'd text her during the day, and she'd say things like, "Oh, Jeff and I are out for lunch," or "Jeff and I are running errands." I'd brushed it off as normal at first, but then they started going to movies and concerts together. When I was home, I noticed small things that bothered me. Jeff would touch her arm when talking, she'd touch his bicep when he made her laugh, she'd serve him food but not me, and she constantly mentioned Jeff, like, "Jeff told me this," or "Jeff said the funniest thing." These small things raised serious red flags and made me very suspicious. Even though Jeff was staying in the garage suite, Devon would text him late into the night, giggling and chatting away. Meanwhile, I was lying beside her in bed, trying to initiate something, maybe a massage or some intimacy, but she wasn't interested. She just kept texting him. Eventually, I'd roll over and fall asleep while she continued her late-night conversations. There were also little gifts, bath products, and one set even included massage oil. After a week, I noticed the bottle had been opened and used. I didn't use it on her, but I remembered the distinct smell, which I had noticed on Jeff before. I didn't say anything. I just kept gathering evidence and making mental notes. Then, one night, as we lay in bed, she turned to me and said, "I want a baby." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. She insisted, "I think we should have a baby." I reminded her that we had agreed not to. She replied, "I've been thinking, and I think we should have a baby before we're too old." I hesitated, explaining that having a baby is a huge commitment, requiring a lot of time and energy. She got angry, accusing me of treating her like a child. I pointed out that we had discussed this before, but she insisted we never really did. I felt it was an unspoken agreement that she was okay with not having children and was content being a stepmom. She then asked, "So I'm not allowed to change my mind? You won't let me be a mom?" I tried to calm her down, saying we needed to talk more about it and maybe now wasn't the best time. She demanded to know when would be a good time and if we could discuss it tomorrow. I suggested we sleep on it and talk about it the next day, but she got angry and stormed out of the room. I couldn't bring myself to tell her in that moment that I had a vasectomy, making it nearly impossible for me to father a child unless I had it reversed, which isn't guaranteed to work. The whole conversation felt off to me. It was strange that she suddenly wanted a baby, something she had never shown interest in before. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong, and I decided I needed to play along for now. The next day, I apologized and agreed to try for a baby. She was ecstatic, and we attempted several times that day. About a week later, she handed me a box containing a positive pregnancy test. I was stunned. I could have cried. I knew it couldn't be mine. From what I understand, you can't determine pregnancy a week after conception, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I was certain the baby wasn't mine. My suspicion was that it was Jeff's, so I started observing them more closely. Devon and I had agreed not to announce the pregnancy immediately, but as I watched her and Jeff, I caught him touching her belly tenderly. I acted like I hadn't noticed, but it was clear he was touching her in a loving, intimate way. A few weeks later, Devon mentioned she was going for her first prenatal exam and that Jeff would drive her as he had errands to run in the area. I offered to take time off work to accompany her, but she insisted I didn't need to. I insisted, "I'm the father, I want to be there." She gave a weak smile and replied, "Great, of course you do." At the appointment, the doctor asked her about the conception date, and she mentioned the date we had been together. During the ultrasound, the doctor returned and announced she was 12 weeks pregnant. I was puzzled and looked at Devon, who seemed genuinely surprised, and asked the doctor, "Is this for real?" The doctor confirmed, saying it seemed like a miracle. I feigned excitement, making sure not to reveal my suspicions. When we got home, Devon was ecstatic, saying, "It was meant to be. What a miracle." I'm so excited. That night, we had sex again, and I turned over and fell asleep. I had the next day off, but I knew she had an early start for a wedding she was working on. I saw my opportunity and took it. Devon was out, and Jeff was heading to work, so I quickly packed up her things, loaded them into our trailer, and parked it on the street. I had a spare key to Jeff's suite, so I went in, gathered his stuff, and added it to the trailer, then locked it securely. When Devon came home, she saw the trailer parked outside. I had changed the locks on the doors and reset the garage code, so she couldn't get in. She banged on the front door, and I talked to her through the doorbell camera, telling her we were done and that I knew the baby wasn't mine. She called me crazy, shouting and crying, making a scene. I could see our neighbors peeking out. I repeated, "The baby isn't mine. It's Jeff's." She yelled back, "Don't be insane. Why would it be Jeff's?" I asked her to explain. She asked how it couldn't be mine, and I told her there was less than a 1% chance, and I knew because I had a vasectomy. Her purse and bags dropped to the ground, and she stood there, stunned. "Let me explain," she stammered. I cut her off, saying, "Save it. I know it's not mine. We're done. It's over." I told Devon to get out, and I was even nice enough to pack the trailer for her. She called someone, and I assumed it was Jeff because he showed up minutes later in his patrol car. He saw the trailer and the lock on the garage suite, telling me I was losing my mind and that the baby couldn't possibly be his. I told him, "I'll believe it when I see a paternity test." For those asking how she never suspected anything or why she didn't get pregnant before, she had been on birth control pills for PCOS, or so she claimed. She was supposedly switching brands and happened to get pregnant with Jeff's baby. Terrible timing. Additionally, she had a strong aversion to, let's say, man juice. She was repulsed by it and refused to let me finish inside her. She rarely pleased me in other ways because the sight of it disgusted her. I won't go into details, but that was the situation. Update: so I'm getting divorced again. Another failed marriage. It feels terrible, but what can you do? During the divorce, Devon got a paternity test, which confirmed what I suspected. The baby is Jeff's. He probably knew all along and thought he could just stay in the garage suite and raise the baby as Uncle Jeff from a distance. A friend of mine did me a huge favor and got Jeff transferred to a remote northern town. Devon, I guess, followed him up there. She was trying to cover up the affair by pretending I was the father, but my vasectomy saved me from raising a child that wasn't mine. By the time she realized she was pregnant, it was too late. Trish and I talk every day. She checks in on me and she's been incredibly supportive. I'm focusing on spending quality time with my kids and doing my best to be a good father. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Wife of 20 years asked for a hall pass to sleep with someone else, but then I caught her on a date with him, so I sent his wife roses with the restaurant name. My wife and I have been together for 20 years. We met in our freshman year of high school and we've been inseparable ever since. We were each other's firsts in every way. First kiss, first love, first everything. We went to prom together and even attended the same college. After graduating, we got married and settled into our life together. Starting a family was always our dream, so once we had stable jobs, we decided it was the right time to have children. Fast forward about 11 years and we had 2 kids, owned our own home, and were on track to retire early so we could travel and enjoy life to the fullest. I thought we were living the dream, but everything changed when my sister-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was my wife's best friend, and her death hit my wife incredibly hard. She was by her sister's side through every step of the battle, but ultimately she passed away. It was a devastating blow to the entire family, myself included. It's such a cliché, but my sister-in-law was truly a beam of light in the world. My wife took the loss the hardest. Her sister was her confidant, her shopping buddy, the one person she turned to for everything. I did my best to be there for my wife, helping her through the darkest days of her grief. After about 6 months, my wife started to emerge from her grief. She had all of my sister-in-law's journals and notebooks, which she read through during her mourning. I could only imagine the whirlwind of emotions she was experiencing, so I tried to be as supportive as possible, always there to listen when she needed to talk. One thing that deeply affected her was the realization that her sister felt she hadn't lived enough. Through the journal entries, my wife saw how her sister felt like her life was cut short. This made my wife feel inspired to start living fully. She wanted to travel, go skydiving, and embrace every moment she had. I completely agreed with her. That's why I had been working 60 hours a week since college, to make early retirement possible so we could truly enjoy life. Over the next few weeks, my wife embraced her new lifestyle. She started taking pottery classes, something she'd always been interested in. She taught herself how to rock climb and even scheduled a bungee jumping trip for her and our son. She seemed to be fully immersing herself in this fresh chapter of her life. I was happy for her. It seemed like she was healing from the loss of her sister. One night, after returning from the climbing gym, she seemed a bit off. Before that, she had been upbeat and excited about her new activities. After dinner, with the kids in bed, she pulled me out to the patio where we shared a couple of glasses of wine and looked at the stars. As our conversation neared its end, she brought up the idea of us having a hall pass. For those unfamiliar, a hall pass in a committed monogamous relationship is a one-time opportunity for each partner to have sex with someone outside the relationship. I was completely taken aback by her suggestion. It felt so out of the blue. I asked her why she was bringing this up. She assured me that she loved me, but felt she might be missing out on something because she had only ever been with me. She tried to frame it gently, but it was impossible not to feel hurt by what she said. I told her I wasn't supportive of the idea. We had been married for 20 years, and I couldn't understand why this was an issue now. I didn't want to sleep with anyone else, and I wasn't okay with her doing so either. As we were about to go back inside, I stopped and asked if there was someone she had been interested in. She was hesitant at first, but after a moment, she admitted there was someone at the climbing gym she found attractive. She mentioned he was flirty, and recently, he had asked her out for drinks. She assured me she had turned him down and would tell him she was married, but I still went to bed that night feeling uneasy. It took a few days for me to process what she had suggested. I was deeply hurt, but after some time, I forgave her, and we moved on as if the conversation had never happened. A week later, she mentioned that the climbing gym was offering a class to start working outdoors, and she wanted to sign up. One Saturday, she left early in the morning for the class, or so I thought. Our daughter was starting to lie about her whereabouts, sneaking off to parties and hanging out with friends we didn't approve of. We had told her to leave her location on Snapchat maps so we could verify her whereabouts. That afternoon, our daughter said she was going to a friend's house, so I checked her location on Snapchat to make sure she wasn't lying. Everything seemed fine on her end, but I noticed my wife's avatar was in the heart of the city. I was puzzled since I had been told she was headed to a park about 30 minutes outside the city. I zoomed in and saw that she was at a bar. I tried to rationalize it. thinking she might have just joined some people from the climbing gym for drinks after their climb, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. I remembered her mentioning the guy from the climbing gym who had asked her out for drinks. It wasn't a stretch to wonder if she was there with him. I was home alone, and the bar was only about a 15-minute walk from our house. I grabbed the dog, and we set off. I kept checking the map to ensure she was still there and hadn't left. When I reached the bar, I peered through the windows and saw my wife sitting at a table with a man. They were leaning in close, both smiling widely as they chatted. The man reached across the table and took my wife's hand, and she didn't pull away. Hand-holding isn't necessarily cheating, but it was a clear sign that something more might be going on. I left before she saw me and went home, unsure whether to confront her or gather more information on my own. When she finally came home, she headed straight for the shower without saying a word to me. I tried to talk to her, but she brushed me off, saying she was sweaty and gross from climbing. That response confirmed my suspicions that something had happened with that man. She had dropped her gym bag near our bed, and I noticed her phone still inside. I grabbed it, hoping to find some information about the man she was with. I searched the bar's name in her text messages and found a chat with an unsaved number. I scrolled back to the beginning of the conversation, which had started about a week before she brought up the hall pass. As I skimmed through the messages, I looked for any hints of an affair. Eventually, I found a few exchanged pictures and some explicit messages. I also saw their plans to meet at the bar, along with a fabricated story they had concocted for me and his partner. I didn't recognize the guy at first, but I managed to identify him through the climbing gym's social media page. They had posted pictures with clients, and he was clearly tagged in one. After some more digging, I discovered that he was married and had a newborn baby. The revelation was gut-wrenching. The pain and betrayal I felt were indescribable. I had been with my wife for 20 years, and she was ready to throw it all away for a fling. I was consumed by fury and revulsion at the thought of what they had done. At the end of their message chain, with no context, was the name of a restaurant, along with a date and time. A week had passed since I uncovered my wife's affair, and I devised a plan to catch them in the act. As I considered my next steps, it occurred to me that the wife of her affair partner deserved to know the truth as well. On the day of their rendezvous, I sent his wife a dozen roses with a card that had the restaurant's details. My hope was to lure her into thinking he had a surprise planned for her. I waited outside the restaurant, watching as she approached. I followed her inside, and we both spotted our partners holding hands simultaneously. She rushed over to them and started yelling, creating a scene. My wife, startled by my presence, attempted to explain, insisting it wasn't what it looked like. I demanded an explanation for the text messages, and she fell silent. I informed her that our relationship was over and that she could expect to see me in court. The next 8 months were consumed by a bitter divorce battle, with custody being the most contentious issue. Both of us wanted primary custody of our children, but we ultimately settled on joint custody. I retained the house, and she received no spousal support. Her affair partner, who was also divorced, was obligated to pay child support and alimony to his ex. We recently finalized the divorce, and we were finally free of each other. I'm at a loss about what to do next. I had been with only one woman for 20 years, and she betrayed me. I'm struggling to figure out how to move forward.